There was a healthcare system, I think it was Illinois, and they were so backed up with studies that needed to be read, inpatients, patients in the ICU, that they actually closed their outpatient imaging centers. They said, we're going to close the outpatient imaging centers for a couple of weeks so we can catch up.
Welcome to Frame by Frame, Rethink Imaging, a podcast by Radiologists. Here, we explore the intricate world of medical imaging, aiming to dissect the field and inspire both professionals and curious minds alike. I'm your host, Chris St. John. Welcome back to Frame by Frame, Rethink Imaging. I am Chris St. John. Today, I am joined by Dr. Ian Weissman, a radiologist at the Milwaukee VA Medical Center and a nationally recognized leader in radiology. He has held leadership roles with the American College of Radiology, including chairing the Veterans Affairs Committee and the Patient and Family-Centered Care Outreach Committee. He has served on the ACR's Council Steering Committee, currently serves on the RSNA Government Relations Committee. He's a speaker for the ACR's Radiology Leadership Institute. Dr. Weissman is a strong advocate for patient-centered care, clinician wellness, and workforce mitigation strategies. He was the first physician to achieve the designation of Leadership Mastery through the Radiology Leadership Institute. Dr. Weissman is a fellow of the ACR, and his national recognitions include the RLI's Impact in Leadership Award and the ACR's Advocate of the Year. Now that I'm through that quite lengthy intro, welcome to the show, Dr. Weissman. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Chris. It's a great pleasure. You can call me Ian. That's fine. We'll keep this casual. So,
well, Ian, I wanted to talk to you today to talk about the workforce shortage going on today in the world of medical imaging. So can we just start with the big picture? How would you describe the current radiology workforce shortage to folks outside of the field? And what's like a rough snapshot of where we're at right now?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And certainly, I think at the national level, we're all very concerned. I think as a patient, for the patients out there, I would tell you all that I think we're holding our own. A lot of my colleagues were working really, really hard, as many of you in your jobs as well, to keep things moving. I know colleagues who work long hours to make sure we get the reports out to patients in a timely fashion. I myself, because I understand what's happening in our supply chain, in a sense, we'll actually call patients at night once it's past business hours to speed up their care. So I will call a patient just to make sure that their care is expedited. Patients are very appreciative of that. And these are things I'm trying to do. And I know some of my colleagues are doing similar things. But looking overall with what we're faced with, there's currently about 38,000 radiologists practicing in the country. And we know by taking a look at data, like Medicare data, things we can track because we know how many radiologists are practicing, that we're short probably around 1,500 radiologists. That may be a little bit more, a little bit less. So that's a lot. And that's our best guess. It's possible the numbers may even be higher because we know a lot of our colleagues, due to challenges, some are getting older. There's certainly more stress in the profession. We can talk about that as well. That some of our colleagues are moving to part-time. And that's hard to track. So we know radiologists are working, but we don't know necessarily how many have moved to part-time. So the numbers may actually be greater in terms of the workforce shortages that we're dealing with. And I think we're starting to see cracks in what's happening around us. And again, not just in radiology, but in different specialties as well. I'm sure many of you are starting to see when you call your primary care doctor, or if you have children, you're calling your pediatrician, it's hard to get in. There's longer delays in trying to get in to see your clinician. And the same is true for radiology. And we're starting to see things which I've never seen before. There was a healthcare system, I think it was Illinois, and they were so backed up with studies that needed to be read, patients in the ICU, that they actually closed their outpatient imaging centers. They said, we're going to close the outpatient imaging centers for a couple of weeks so we can catch up. And that's something I haven't seen before. So it's letting me know that we really have some severe challenges, but we're finally looking at the national level to try to find solutions. We can kind of dig into that. I can tell you what I think will help us, and I have some other, and I'd like to hear your thoughts as well, because obviously we're all in this together, whether you're a radiologist or you're working as a teacher or you're working as a cashier someplace. I mean, we're all dealing with workforce shortages right now. So,
yeah. So I'm curious. You said that was in Illinois that they shut down their outpatient for a few weeks.
I think it was in Illinois. I think it was a healthcare system in Illinois, is my recollection.
And I mean, I can't help but ask how did that go for them, right? Like, how was it returning to adding outpatient back in? Did they just have this even larger backup? It feels like it almost, it's like an Ouroboros, like they're going to catch themselves there.
Yeah, they were transparent. They put information out to their referred clinicians. They put information out to their patients. Patients now have access to their phones, so they can send a message to patients saying this is what's happening, or patients try to schedule. They try to be as transparent as possible. I'll give you an example of how one of my colleagues is handling a similar thing. They didn't close their outpatient imaging center, but I have a colleague who works at an excellent academic center in Virginia, and they're facing the same thing, whether you're in an academic center, whether you're in a private center. I mean, we know by looking at data that about 70% of radiologists, when we survey them, they say we're short. And academics probably a bit higher, 75%. And what my colleague did, who's a radiologist and worked from an academic center, he realized what was happening. And what he was very concerned about is patients who are getting cancer imaging, because that's very serious. When a patient goes in for cancer imaging, their stress level is quite high. You can imagine. And they want to make sure the treatment's working. They want to make sure it's not progressing. I mean, that can be really, really stressful. And he realized that they may not be able to interpret the studies in a timely fashion. We typically like to finish the study the same. We do the study the same day, we interpret the same day. But we know now that we're starting to see delays. In addition, when I told you about that healthcare system closing their outpatient imaging center for a couple of weeks, I've known and I've heard for quite some time that some academic centers may be backed up 2 weeks to turn around their studies. I mean, they're not closing anything, but it may be a 2-week delay. So you're waiting for your cancer imaging, a 2-week delay. So what he did is similar to what I told you. He talked to his referring doctors. He put out notes to the patients, letting them know this is what's happening. We have in a sense, he said we have a workforce shortage, and there may be a delay in getting your imaging studies, but we haven't forgotten about you. We will be getting it up, but we just want you to know. Okay, so we're trying to do things we can to try to let patients know and include them in it, because when you include patients in the situation, you kind of bring them along with you and you're all together on the same team, things work better. So that's kind of what's happening. I mean, in that sense, they didn't close the place, but they're informing people. And that's what they did with the Illinois Center as well. So.
And so, I mean, you have said before, right? And it might be obvious to folks, like this didn't happen overnight. Can you walk us through a bit of the timeline and how we ended up here? Is it just about rising imaging volumes? Is it about supply and training pipeline? Is it a sicker population?
Yeah, those are all excellent points, and that's exactly what you said. It's a combination of many, many things. And in the profession, we've been watching this for many years. And I'll just give you some data so we kind of all know what we're faced with. This is a surprising number. When you think about, and I'm just going to talk about the ER now. So people get CT scans or CAT scans. When you think about the number of CTs ordered in the ER each year, and this is just in the ER, I'm not talking about ICU, inpatient, things like that, outpatient. So just in the ER, there's 100 million CTs ordered every year, 100 million CTs. And every decade increases by about 11 million CTs. That's a lot of CTs. And that's just in the ER, not the other things. So certainly we have more imaging. Radiologists have always, in a sense, thought of ourselves as a doctor's doctor. Where we can look at the patient's, what's happening inside the patient's body. It can be very helpful for situations where the clinical history may not be as evident, or a physical exam may be challenging. You get a CT scan or you get an MRI and you look inside and you try to get a sense of what's happening. So referring doctors rely on us to help them in the interpretation. The growth of imaging has also been increasing about 1 to 5% every year, ultrasound, CT, MRI, for the reasons I talked about. I think that, we know for sure that we have an aging population in this country, right? There was a time where maybe 12% of patients were on Medicare, maybe 10 years ago. Now we're approaching 30% of patients on Medicare. maybe in the next 5, 10 years. So an increasing elderly population. We have younger patients who we know we're either diagnosing them sooner or we're seeing increased incidence of more serious things. And we hear it on the news all the time. We hear about colon cancer. Now in patients under the age of 50, that's their leading cause of cancer, which is colon cancer. And we don't know what's causing that. There's obviously lots of environmental challenges, but we're having younger patients who are sicker. You also mentioned, do we have enough people that we're training? And we know that that's probably not the case. We don't have enough funding in our profession for radiology residents to go through their training, and we're working on that. And then there's other things too. We've been following this. We've been following what we call burnout. In the profession, we've been seeing that, and we've been trying to find solutions to try to mitigate that. And we know that this has been happening for quite some time. And as early as 2018, 2019, there were lots of organizations, including in radiology, working on trying to mitigate that, trying to find strategies to help clinicians. And then as we're making progress, and we had, even in the American College of Radiology, we had a well-being committee, which I served on. What happened in 2020? We had COVID. So as we're trying to build things up, suddenly in 2020, it just kind of, the house of cards crumbled, and we've lost a lot of people. So it's all these compounding factors, I think, which is leading to this.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. On a previous episode, I was talking with a psychologist actually about radiologist burnout. And it was so interesting. Dr. Elizabeth Krupinski, she had pointed out like the shift of film to digital in terms of reading images as this massive turning point, because all of the sudden that the time baked in to develop the images themselves, like that was rest time for the radiologist. And all of a sudden you just have this unending, incessant wave of image after image after image. And then, of course, like you talk about, like the story never stopped.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, that's exactly right. And when I was younger, it's like you said, we had films on hard copy. You'd throw them up on this viewing board. It would take time to put them up. It would take time to take them down. You had a little bit of a break, but as you said, it's on a computer now. It's like you're scrolling, and it is nonstop. I mean, I work long days along with a lot of my colleagues, and I look back at this week, and you sit in your chair, and it's nonstop all day. It's film after film after film. And when you take a look at CT scans, which may have had less images in the past, CAT scans, you may have thousands of images now that you have to review and go through them and make sure you're not missing things. And you find strategies to try to get you through it, but you're still looking at lots and lots and lots of images, and that's kind of image overload. It's a challenge.
Well, and then I feel like you also have the driving force of trying to read as many images as possible for your patients, but also just trying to turn over RVUs and, get paid and do your job and, make money for the facility. Like there is this undercurrent of capitalism. And I'm not trying to bash that, but I'm just saying, like, to me, it seems ever present as a factor in trying to get through images as fast as possible.
Yeah, the economics, unfortunately, is a big part of it. And I think that's why I think radiologists, and I don't think, again, it's not just radiologists, it's all our colleagues in all the medical specialties are facing similar things with RVUs. We talk about this thing called moral injury, right? Where you know the right thing to do, but because of the constraints of the situation, as you mentioned, you may not be able to do it. And they actually, one of my colleagues, Bettina Seward, who's out on the East Coast, and she's kind of specialized in this area, moral injury and things like that. She surveyed radiologists, and the majority of them said exactly what you said, that they're all have this moral injury because they're being asked to read more films than they feel they really can do because it's increasing so rapidly. And when they talk to their administrator to tell them the issue, their administrator says, just read more films. Okay. So that's why we have, as you say, people who are getting older or even younger people who are just saying, look, I can't do this. I can't practice like I need to practice. And And I'm seeing a lot of young people actually moving toward things which I've never seen before. Typically the older guys like me, we're used to a certain thing. We work for a company or we work for VA. I work for the VA. It's a certain thing. You're kind of used to that. Show up in the morning, leave in the evening. A lot of younger people are saying, you know what, this is not for me. Uh, I'm going to become a 1099 employee, and I'm going to decide who I want to work for, what I want to work for. As you mentioned, the economics, who's going to pay me the most amount of money? And you have actually radiologists who are working for competing healthcare organizations, which is unheard of, to have someone working for one, healthcare organization A, which competes against healthcare organization B, and they're working for them. But the organizations they need physicians so much that they don't put in non-compete clauses and things like that. They say, okay, work for us, and if you can work for us, you can read for us, we're fine. So this is a situation we're in. These are things we have not seen before. So we're paving new ground, I think, every day. So
this is not just like this shortage does not apply just to radiologists, right? I mean, inside the hospital, we have shortages of technologists and nurses. Do you think patients have a solid understanding of what this shortage is looking like, outside of just getting their exam scheduled?
yeah, I think patients are seeing this. I think patients are realizing what's happening. And again, that's why it's important of the strategies that my colleague at this academic center was doing, to be transparent, to send information out to patients, to make them part of the team, also make your referring doctors part of the team so they know what's happening. I think you're absolutely right. I think patients are seeing it. And I've seen some surveys which have come out. There was a survey which came out a few years ago, and they asked patients, are you experiencing delays in getting your care? In just a few months, because it was separated by a few months of the survey, it increased from 85% it went up to 85%. Before it was 75% of patients saying, I just don't think I can get in to see my clinician in time, right? And there was another study which came out, talked to patients who were Medicare, and they asked them, what about getting your imaging studies? Are you experiencing the delay in getting your imaging studies? And about half of them said, yes, we are. It's just not like it used to be. If I need to get a follow-up, I can't get in. So I think they're seeing it. And certainly in radiology, for sure, they're experiencing, and they're seeing the primary care physician or their specialty, their dermatologist. I need to go have a follow-up for an appointment, and before maybe a couple of weeks, now it maybe a few months, right? Because they're also short-staffed. And as tough as it is here in the United States, and I think we're going to see more and more challenges as we move forward, we're still doing pretty well relative to other countries. So Canada, which has universal health care, which is fantastic, and I think having a safety net like that is very important. Of course, we realize there's many times two tiers. You have the universal health care, but then if you want to pay a certain amount of money, you get a second health care, which allows you to see clinicians a little bit faster. So it's not quite universal health care, but everyone still is within the safety net. They're not obligated to go to the ER if they don't have insurance. So that's a good thing. That's something we're looking at across the world as to what systems work the best. But in Canada, if you're trying to get an imaging study, let's say in British Columbia, there's hundreds of thousands of patients ahead of you, hundreds of thousands of patients, which is just staggering to think about that. So if you're a woman and let's say you find a mass in your breast and you need to get in to have get an ultrasound or get a mammogram and an ultrasound, and then they say, yes, there's something there, that's taking you time to get in, and then you have to get a biopsy of that mass. It may take you weeks, to get in. In contrast to in this country, where they still will try to expedite patients, try to triage them so they come a bit faster. So, we're seeing major challenges. And in Canada, I mentioned in Canada, of course, the challenges. In the UK, similar thing. I told you that we're short about 1,500 radiologists in this country, roughly out of about 38,000. In the UK, they're short about 2,000 radiologists. 2,000 radiologists for a much, much smaller country. So, we're still a lot better, I think, than a lot of countries, but we're moving in that direction, and we have to find strategies to try to help us, as we move forward.
I mean, I've even noticed that just, personally, my mother is, she's now like a couple of years post heart transplant, actually. But, pre-transplant, she needed to get regular heart caths And she was in rough shape, and even just to get like a right heart catheterization was sometimes like pulling teeth. Like, it was crazy. But I want to touch back because you were saying a minute ago, you were talking about different kinds of strategies. And I'm curious, what kinds of broad strategies are really on the table to address the shortage, whether it's increasing residency slots or recruiting internationally, or even, the talk of the town, like bringing AI into the game.
Yeah, AI is an important thing, and certainly at the RSNA, our big radiology conference, Radiological Society of North America, which is going to be in a couple of weeks. I know you're going to be there, and your colleagues
I'll
are going
be
to be
there in
there.
10 days.
Yeah, 10 days. That's a big thing, and we're hopeful that AI will help us. And now, there's interpretive AI and there's non-interpretive AI. So interpretive AI is where it helps us actually get through the images a little bit faster. Non-interpretive AI is where perhaps it triages certain studies to the top of our list, so we know which studies we have to read fast, and other things, gets very detailed. I can tell you that certain countries, like the UK, I mentioned they're short 2,000 radiologists. In contrast, there are 1,500 radiologists, but they're a much smaller country than we are, much smaller population. They have different regulatory systems and things like that we do in this country, but they're already starting to think outside the box, if you want to think of it that way. Some people may agree with this or not agree with what they're doing, but they are already working on AI algorithms that will read chest radiographs or chest x-rays, as we call them, in the absence of radiologists even looking at it. So the AI will just analyze a chest radiograph, a chest x-ray, and just make that interpretation. And I'm not even sure the radiologists will necessarily be involved in that because they don't have enough radiologists to read what they need to read, because there's radiographs, x-rays, which are a lot of imaging, but then you also have ultrasounds, CT scans, MRIs, very complex imaging, which AI could not read yet with any sophistication. So they're working on things like chest radiographs to at least not miss a lung nodule or not miss a lung collapse, big things, training algorithms to do that. And I was talking to my colleagues about that, and he said, they're doing the same thing in South Korea. So whether we will do that in the United States, we may be moving toward that point. Where I see it being used now for the immediate future is it will be somewhat of an aid for us. Okay, so now we have AI at my place of work, and it takes a look at lung nodules, and it measures them for me and compares it to the prior study. Now, I don't think it's there yet. I'm starting not to rely on it so much. I look at it myself rather than relying on the AI, but I do use it for measurements. So instead of me having to measure the thing with a cursor on the computer, which takes me time, I rely on this measurement, which does save me time. So we're gonna be seeing things like that with AI. I mean, that's one thing. You mentioned another thing, which is increasing residency spots. Okay, that's a big thing. And it's not just radiology, which is short. We have primary care physicians. We don't have enough primary care physicians. We don't have enough mental health professionals. Okay, a lot of people are suffering with mental health challenges in today's environment with everything that's happening around the world. We need people to be well, right? When people go through medical school, they have to go then and do postgraduate training for residency, and that has to be funded through someone. And it's been historically funded through CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicare Services, which provides funding for them to do this. There's other sources of funding as well. The VA, Veterans Administration, also funds postgraduate trainees. Private hospitals will sometimes do it themselves. Private groups will sometimes do it themselves. But we just don't have enough funding positions. So, and we know that we're moving toward a shortage. So there have been some strategies which have come out, which have been proposed at Congress. One of them was an act that Congress approved 200 more funded positions through Medicaid for the next 5-6 years, 200 more per year. But taking a look at radiology, of those 200 that were approved per year, only 6 went to radiology. 6 went to radiology for some more radiology positions, and 3 went to interventional radiology, because the bulk of the positions are going toward primary care and mental health. So in radiology, we're not going to get there very fast through this route. Now they're actually proposing another act through Congress where they would approve 2,000 more funded positions per year. That would be tremendous. But with everything that's happening now with government cuts and government funding, and we all hear the news every day, I'm not convinced that's going to happen anytime soon. So that's a second route that we are looking at. And it may come to the fact that groups will have to fund their own positions. If they want more trainees, they may have to do it themselves. They have to pay for it themselves out of their own hospital, funding, right? They may have to do it privately. And then the third thing that you mentioned, which is very important, is what about, we have people who come and train from a different country, and they train in the United States. And once they train, many times they have to go back to their country. But many of them want to stay here and work. Can we keep these people here, which are very valuable clinicians working in this country? And there's certain things that we've been working on. They've been working on Congress to do that. But of course, the latest thing that you've probably heard in the news is current administration is thinking of imposing a fee, increasing the fee on their visas for people from different countries that work here. And we've heard that in the tech industry, that if you bring someone from outside the country to work in the tech industry, they want the company to pay $100,000 for the privilege of this person working in this country. Well, we're hearing the same thing in medicine too. A visa may have been several $1,000s before. Is it going to be $100,000? For a clinician from outside this country to practice doing primary care someplace or radiology, we don't know yet. But all these things that we're thinking of as strategies, we're having lots of challenges now.
Obviously, these different strategies are going to take time and years to actually yield results. I'm curious, what do you prioritize in terms of these strategies, or what would you prioritize so that patients and providers could see relief, sooner rather than later?
And this is my thought on this. And as you mentioned, I lecture at the Radiology Leadership Institute, and I'm lecturing nationally on workforce strategies. How can we mitigate the workforce shortage? What strategies can we use? And my thoughts on this is, yes, we need AI. We need to increase residency spots. We need to see if we can bring people who want to live in this country from different countries to help us with patient care. But that will take some time. But I think there are strategies that we can do ourselves to try to keep people in the profession. So when I was on the Council Steering Committee of the ACR, American College of Radiology, I put together an initiative called Retain, which I work with some of my colleagues who are interested in this across the country. And the Retain initiative is sharing leadership and organizational strategies with our colleagues to let them know what works. And the way I published it, just was released in Health Management a few weeks ago. So if you want to Google it, you could take a look at it. But the strategy to this is, we have articles that have been written, we have books that have been written on this topic, but people are so busy. So I put together this initiative where we record a 60-second video, because people like to look at, they like to take a look at little tiny videos on YouTube or TikTok and things like that. So I put together a 6-second video, which talks about, what's an effective way to keep someone retained in your organization, because it's so expensive when people leave, and a lot of people are moving around. 11% of radiologists looked for a different job last year. They're looking for a place which may be better, but all places have similar challenges. So we put out a 6-second video. So I talked about something called servant leadership, and I did that in 60 seconds. And the principle of servant leadership is, if you can work for a leader who really is concerned about your professional development, who's concerned about you as an individual, who's going to inquire, inform, develop, recognize you, do these type of things, you're much less likely to leave the organization. Okay, it's so important. And it doesn't have to be in radiology; it can be in any profession. It can be if you're working for a manager at a Target, and you have a manager who really cares about you and takes the time to know you, you're much less likely to leave the organization. So I put a video about that. Someone in 60 seconds talked about how important building a positive culture is, because that's so important. And in fact, when we take a look at organizations like the National Academy of Medicine and the U.S. Surgeon General, who have studied this in detail, who have brought in real thought leaders across this country, they find out that the most important things are exactly that: servant leadership, building a culture, building a positive culture, positive community. And we all know what works best in our place of work. We can always find solutions for that. If we can do those kind of things, we're much less likely to lose people. So that's my thought on this, that we have to, in a sense, be good to each other. We have to work together collaboratively at a systems level, at a local level, to make sure that people look forward to coming to work to the best of our ability. It's going to be hard, right? It's going to be hard. We're going to be reading lots of films all day, but can you have leaders who really care about their people? Because otherwise people are going to leave, right? I mean, 11% of people seeking new employment last year, that's a lot. Very disruptive to the individual, very disruptive to the organization. And it can cost millions of dollars, $3 million to recruit a new radiologist because loss of revenue, you got to recruit new people. So can we self-manage? And that's what I've been lecturing on and articles I've been writing. And now on the Radiological Society of North America, we have a committee that I serve on at the national level called WE, which has focused on workforce and also education. And it's a new committee, and I'm going to be leading some initiatives with my colleagues to try to do this, because we have to, in a sense, do it ourselves, I think, as we hope AI will get there and other things. But at the moment, we got to do it ourselves. So this is what I think will work.
You were talking about, investing in your team and your people, and having, these striving for more positive workplaces. It may be a bit self-evident, but do you have any advice for small but meaningful changes organizations can make that don't require lots of money or new legislation, but can help to improve retention and morale?
Yes, I do. In fact, you have one of my colleagues on your podcast, a person I really respect highly. We work together at the national level for the ACR. We have strategic retreats. His name is Dave Larson. And I think Dave Larson, in my opinion, is one of our greatest thought leaders in radiology today. He's a real leader in quality and safety issues. He's working on AI now at Stanford, where he is. And I think he was just on your podcast, and he was talking about peer review and how important this is. So, and he's been a leader in developing this along with his colleagues across the nation. So I want to reinforce what I'm sure he talked about in this podcast, because I've heard him speak, because he heads a quality and safety meeting that we have through the American College of Radiology. The concept is peer review versus peer learning. Okay, and we all do this in whatever specialty we are in, whether we're in medicine or engineering, outside of medicine. You have to have some type of quality control built into your process. And we've done historically in medicine is what's called peer review. And what that is someone will review your case, and they'll give it a score, let's say 1 to 4 or 1 to 3, whatever your system is. And if you get let's say it's 1 to 3, you get a 3, that's not good. Okay, so you'll many times have to appear in front of a peer review committee, and they'll ask you to talk about what happened. And it can be very stressful, because many times there's not a lot of transparency. There can be a lot of fear associated with this, because you don't know what the consequences are going to be. They always say it's protected, but you never know. And many times you don't even hear about it until suddenly you get this letter from them saying you need to appear in front of this peer review committee. Okay. Well, that's a problem. And can there be consequences? Can people lose their can they lose their employment? Well, if that's the case, if there's this fear or this perception of fear built into the system, then people are not going to disclose. People are not going to share things. They're not going to share things they've seen with different colleagues for fear of maybe someone doing it to them. I mean, it's not going to work, which is, by the way, very different than engineering. In engineering, their system is to disclose, is to fail. They want to fail quickly and then succeed. And Elon Musk is a good example of that with his rockets. He failed brilliantly. I mean, he'd have rockets explode on their launch pad, but to him, that was always a success. Clearly, we're not dealing with human lives here, so a little bit more challenging in medicine, I think. But you say, okay, my rocket exploded, great, we're going to build another rocket, which will be better. Well, the same thing is true in medicine. We have to identify issues so that we can get better. So peer review, we know historically in medicine, has not worked as well as we'd like. So what Dave Larson and his colleagues did is they developed a new strategy, a new paradigm called peer learning. Peer learning, which is still peer review, but it's in a different fashion. The culture of peer learning is quite different. So peer learning is going to a colleague and saying, okay, and this is in a protected environment again, I came across this case you saw. Well, first of all, you go to someone, thank you for everything you're doing. I value you. We're all working hard. I appreciate you. I value. I came across this case. See what you think. I came across this article I read a few months ago. Take a look at it. I found helpful. All right, see what you think. And I hope this helps. And then not just doing that, not just being collaborative, supporting people, but also telling someone, hey, great pickup. Wow, you picked up this amazing thing on this case. Wow, I saw this and you picked it up and fantastic. I mean, building this positive culture. Because again, we're all active learners. We're all clinicians. We all want to get better. We're all constantly going to RSNA. We're going to be in 10 days. We're all trying to learn. So how can you build a culture? How can you build a community which is going to be much more productive? So people feel they want to share. And actually, there was I believe this was at Boston University, one of the leaders in peer learning did this. She found out that the number of people who actually were disclosing, who were sharing cases with each other, went up exponentially. Before a very low percentage, it went up to a very high percentage of people actually sharing cases so that everyone will learn collectively together, like they do in engineering, like they do outside of medicine. And this is what David's been working on and our colleagues out in this very important initiative. And the good news is that it's supported by the American Board of Radiology, which is when you take your boards, that's how you get certification, through the American Board of Radiology. They support it. The American College of Radiology supports it. Other organizations are doing it, but not everyone's doing it. Okay, people are still reticent not to go with this peer learning, which we know works, but moving with peer review. And again, it's building a culture, right? Building a positive culture because we know that's so important.
I'm curious to hear about this RSNA. You said Workforce and Education Committee. When did that committee get started, and what have y'all been up to?
Yeah, so it's a new committee. It's actually part of the RSNA has started a government relations committee. And within government relations, we're working on several things. One is AI, one is fostering research, and then initially education, informing our colleagues at the RSNA of initiatives and things like that. But at our last strategic retreat that just happened a few months ago, and I must say I was a big proponent of this because I'm so concerned about workforce, and this is what I lecture on now across the country, and I'm very concerned. It's what keeps me up at night, knowing that we don't have enough clinicians moving in the future. Because I said, look, we got to talk about workforce. Okay, I mean that's what, in fact, when we survey our colleagues and we ask them what's the biggest threat to radiology, workforce comes up and has come up for the past few years. It used to be burnout, but of course, burnout has moved to the next level. Next level now it's workforce.
Right.
People are just leaving the profession, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of knew it was coming. COVID came. Now for the last 3 years, and the survey just came out from Mini. Again, this year, what's the biggest threat to radiology? Workforce. Again, was up there. That's why I did the Retain initiative when I was on the American College of Radiology Council Steering Committee to share these 60-second videos with people. And at the meeting, I said, we got to talk about workforce. And we were all in agreement. And I said, and we got to have a catchy name like Retain. How do we retain our colleagues? And so we came up with we. That we are working together we hear you, we hear your concerns, and we're going to work on solutions to basically make sure that we can find solutions, whether it's govern ourselves from within with leadership and organizational strategies, or continue to foster research to help AI development, try to get more trading positions, trying to bring people to this country. I talk about the challenges with that, but it stands for we workforce and education. And I'm very hopeful. And we just met on this several months ago. So I think things are going to start to move quickly. And I'm serving on this committee now for another few years, and I'm going to work very hard to do everything I can to help our colleagues. So
I like hearing that from you, that you're feeling very hopeful, at least relating to this committee in general. But I am, maybe this is too silly of a question, but I'm curious, like what else is making you hopeful right now? Not to end on a sour note. Let's end on a more optimistic note, if that's okay.
I think human beings have a tremendous ability to overcome challenges, right? And I think the thing which makes me hopeful is, and this is something I do as a strategy, I think it's very important to share information with patients, population health strategies, things that I know work. And I think social media it can be a force for good. We know that social media can be used in different ways, but I've always thought of it as a force for good where we educate people, where you learn from people. So when I was chairing the Patient Family-Centered Care Committee through the ACR, put together a strategy over 10 years ago. And every day I share about 5 population health strategies for patients. And by that, I mean, go out there and walk in the woods, exercise, kind of do some tree bathing, that'll help you, right? I tend to talk a lot about vaccines. I know that there's been a lot of politicization on that, but I still think it works. I'm a physician. I get my vaccinations. We didn't have measles. Now we have measles. Okay, so vaccinations work. I put that out there. Sometimes it's popular, sometimes unpopular, depends who hears it. And I do things like that every day. I put out 5 strategies from articles. I don't give my opinion. I put the article out there because I want people to educate themselves. I'll just put out what I think will work. Read it if you agree with it. Use it if you don't. Well, I'm still going to put it out there. In doing that, I'm hearing from patients as well. I'm hearing from clinicians. I'm hearing from patients because they respond. I do this on X. I do this on Blue Sky because 2 different kind of population groups, really. And I put the same stories. And I just am hopeful because I hear these great ideas coming from patients, coming from clinicians. And in fact, on the week subcommittee that I'm working on, that's going to be one of our strategies to actually reach out to patients. Of course, I have experience doing that through the ACR because I did that for many years. But can we collaborate with patients? Can we collaborate with patient groups that are concerned about Alzheimer's, patient groups that are worried about another condition? Can we work with them together collaboratively to find solutions, to go together as a team, shoulder to shoulder, to Congress, to our hospital leaders? Because if I talk to a hospital leader, they may listen to me, but if I have a patient by my side, that's the client, that's the customer. If we go shoulder to shoulder to our hospital leader and say, look, we need this program for this patient, I think we're gonna have better luck. So I'm hopeful because I see so much positive information coming out of patients every day, and I do this every day. And that kind of keeps me going too, because I don't feel like I'm isolated in my own little place. I hear what people are saying, and then I put out there, they give an opinion, I put it out there for other people to read. So I think if we can do this, if we can do this collaborative as a community, I think we will find, we will make progress. And I know at the national level, whether it's the RSNA or the ACR, or we have about 50 radiology organizations, or the multiple other organizations, we have really passionate leaders like Dave Larson and myself and other people. I think if we continue doing this, we will make progress. I know we will. And we have to, right? Because if we don't, what's the alternative, right? So that's why I'm optimistic.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like that's a beautiful place to end, but is there anything else you'd like to touch on before we let you go today?
I would say do the best you can. It's challenging times, but I would say for those of you on social media and those of you who are working in your jobs, just keep on doing what you're doing. Reach out to your legislatures, reach out to your hospital leaders, support your colleagues, build a positive culture in your workplace. We know it's so important. If you're a leader, be a servant leader. That's so important. These are things we can do ourselves. These are strategies we can do ourselves, and just keep on. That's what makes the human race so fantastic. We're always moving forward. We're always getting better. We're always finding strategies. We're always problem solving. I think if we do this, we'll be fine.
Well, Ian, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Chris. It's a great pleasure.
This has been Frame by Frame Rethink Imaging. Dr. Ian Weissman is a radiologist at the Milwaukee VA Center. And Ian, it's just been so great talking to you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. Great pleasure.
Frame by Frame Rethink Imaging is brought to you by Imalogics. Here, you'll find engaging interviews with thought leaders, experts, and patients, sharing stories that showcase the transformative power of medical imaging. To discover how Imalogics is rethinking imaging in healthcare, visit imalogics.com. Be sure to subscribe to Frame by Frame Rethink Imaging on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And from all of us here at Imalogics, thanks for tuning in.